The solidarity and social economy has become really a worldwide movement.
How to guarantee the reproduction and development of life with dignity for all.
We believe in the importance of connecting researchers from different countries and regions to provide a platform for bringing together diverse viewpoints, critical research, and often marginalized voices.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are ready to follow up and play a role in translating the outcomes of this conference into research, into policy, and into action to achieve better strategies and interventions.
Well, good morning. Welcome, first of all, to this conference on social and solidarity economy. My name is Sarah Cook. I'm the director of UNRISD, the UN Research Institute for Social Development, and I'm delighted to be able to welcome you to this conference on social and solidarity economy, which is co-hosted with the ILO, and obviously we're in the ILO's premises, but I will leave it to the Director-General to welcome you here. But I really would like to start by expressing my sincere appreciation on behalf of all of the UNRISD team to the ILO for an excellent, smooth and productive collaboration and for hosting us here. We're very pleased that what was an initial seed of an idea that has been germinating within UNRISD actually for quite a long time grew and blossomed into such a fruitful collaboration. And we're really looking forward to pursuing a partnership with the ILO, but also with many of you into the future on what we think is a very important and I think exciting issue. So why social and solidarity economy and why now? I think recent years have seen a re-emergence, a diversification and expansion of many activities and organizational forms that are encompassed by some definition of social and solidarity economy. These include sort of more traditional forms, cooperatives, mutual associations, newer types of social enterprises, self-help groups, fair trade networks, different kinds of associations of workers, informal sector workers, agricultural workers, things like community currencies or barters and forms of exchange. And this list can go on. There's a big proliferation of kinds of activities which don't necessarily fit well into our currently dominant economic models and institutional theories about how the economy works. And it seems currently that there's a new wave of attention being given to this range of activities by social scientists, by practitioners, by policymakers. And in that context, I think there are new meanings being also attached to these organizational forms. And this is in a context that we are all very aware of crisis in our financialized and globalized economic system, destabilizing levels of inequality, and shrinking planetary boundaries. So in that broader development context, these potentially have a lot of interest to many of us as potential alternative forms of economic organization. 5 years ago, when the world was shocked by the financial meltdown in the global economy, there were some notes of cautious optimism that the crisis might indeed provide the necessary impetus to move towards alternative forms of economic organizing, to a fairer globalization, as the ILO said, refocusing global policy towards inclusion and sustainability, and refocusing on issues such as jobs, rights, and justice. But overall, at a global level, I think we still see that the steps in this direction have been hesitant or stumbling. Instead, we're now seeing, indeed, austerity policies imposed not just on the crisis-affected European economies, but even somewhat perversely in growing economies in the South. But what we're also seeing from the ground up, both in North and in the South, or developed to developing economies, I think these boundaries, our terminology is increasingly blurred and less relevant. But what we are seeing on the ground, North and South, are a revival and diversification of these alternative or other forms of economic organizing, cooperatives and mutual associations, some of which in the financial sector, for example, actually weathered the financial crisis better than other financial institutions. We see workers reopening their factories, in Greece, for example, taking control of factories where they've been laid off and as collective endeavors. We see organizations very much grounded in the real economy, linking processes of accumulation, production, exchange, consumption and distribution, and also with a greater concern for the nature of economic activities as socially embedded, with a concern of fostering solidaristic and solidarity relations, concerned with issues of inclusion and justice, possibly at times with attention also to social reproduction, gender roles and relations, and in some cases prioritizing also sustainable environmental management. And so these diverse forms of economic organization that we see, I think we found from UNRISD them to be particularly visible when we participated last year at Rio+20, particularly in the People's Summit, but also in the main discussions in the main event. However, despite 2012 also being the International Year of Cooperatives, we have not seen very much attention to these forms across the UN system or in the discussions about the post-2015 agenda and the new development agenda. So as the international community focuses its efforts on defining global sustainability goals for the post-2015 period, it seems timely to draw attention to these activities, to attempt to better understand the diverse practices on the ground, to explore what drives them, to ask what are their potential and their limitations as an economic form that can contribute to processes of more equitable, inclusive and sustainable development. So what do we hope for from this conference? I think we've got an extraordinary gathering of people from different disciplines, different perspectives across the world, different countries and regions. So we are really optimistic that this is going to be a very rich exchange of ideas. I think many of us are here as social scientists from different disciplines, perspectives or regions with a shared interest in this set of empirical phenomena which look very different in different parts of the world, which are interpreted very differently from people coming from different worldviews or perspectives, but which by sharing and exchanging, we might be able to draw lessons. Perhaps we can generalize, perhaps we can't. Perhaps we can theorize about them in ways that ultimately will have some greater policy relevance. We're not, of course, here to present, and I think this is, sometimes we hear a critique that this is a sort of idealized or romanticized notion of alternatives. We're not here to present something like that. What I imagine many of us share, however, are the normative principles and values that underpin many of these alternative forms of economic organizing and that lead us to ask whether we can draw lessons from such experience for alternative forms of economic arrangement and policy that can be more equitable and sustainable. So in learning about these diverse experiences, I think we hope to come away with a more nuanced and a deeper understanding of what drives, sustains or constrains these practices. We could, for example, just be witnessing forms of coping mechanism, response to crisis that are essentially involutionary with little scope for accumulation and sustainability. We could be seeing solidaristic forms essentially of redistribution, perhaps a form of social protection. But we could also be seeing opportunities for generating sustainable economic activities, which are also more equitable and sustainable. And key questions, I think, of concern in shaping this conference were about how these social or solidarity enterprises or activities articulate with other forms of capitalist accumulation and market relations, whether on a national, regional or global scale, through value chains, trade networks, finance and credit institutions. And then, of course, what does this mean for policy, either directly in relation to policies focused on these kind of institutions or the broader policy context which could facilitate their activities and expansion. and if there is policy support for such activities, if these enterprises can expand, go to scale, what then might be the implications for the underlying solidaristic values of such organizations when such scaling up may imply deeper integration into a national and global economy organized on different principles. And I'm sure many of you bring your own questions and issues to the table that we haven't thought about and that we look forward to learning. So we're extremely pleased to have this opportunity to engage with you all as researchers, policymakers and practitioners to explore the possible role for research, the future research agenda, but the policy questions at a global and national level. Beyond these substantive discussions, which we're confident will be rich and fruitful, UNRISD also places a very high value on the process of convening such an event, on the creation of spaces within the UN system for the presentation of often critical and challenging research findings and ideas. One of the recognized strengths of UNRISD over its 50 years, and I'm sure you've noticed that we are celebrating our 50th anniversary and that this is one of our major activities for our 50th anniversary. One of the strengths has been UNRISD's convening power. We believe in the importance of connecting researchers from different countries and regions to provide a platform for bringing together diverse viewpoints, critical research, and often marginalized voices, to connect with other researchers, with policymakers, and with the international policy community, particularly within the UN system, and possibly to foster and strengthen new epistemic communities on often neglected issues. And this could well be one such area. So in summary, we hope this conference, through this conference, to raise the profile of discussions and debates on SSE within the UN system and beyond, to take a critical look at the potential and limits of SSE as a development pathway or alternative form of economic organizing, and to provide a space where voices of researchers and practitioners from different regions, disciplines and perspectives can interact with each other, with national policymakers and with all of us in the UN system. And here, of course, our partnership with the ILO is critical, and I'd like to thank again the Director-General, Guy Ryder, as well as some colleagues here, particularly Jürgen Schwettmann from the Director of the Partnerships and Field Support Department, and Simel Essim from the Cooperatives Department, both of whom have very enthusiastically supported this activity from the start. And I know there are many other individuals who have contributed to a smooth collaboration. We're also very delighted to have here the participation of representatives from UN sister agencies, the FAO, UN Women, UNDP and UNCTAD, and also the UN NGLS, the Non-Governmental Liaison Service, which has been extremely supportive from the outset when we raised this idea for this project. At this point, I think I need to make a few announcements, sort of more logistical announcements. There are, in fact, 4 days of activities and events ahead of us. The main conference, which runs till Wednesday lunchtime, has over 40 researchers from 18 countries addressing a number of key themes in plenary and parallel sessions. And the information is in the brochures. I think it will be put up on slides at the breaks, and it's outside the meeting room. So please pay attention to these activities and where you need to be. And most excitingly, to make this an almost paperless event, there is also an app. I think there's information about it posted, where you can also get links to information, other papers from the website. And I think a wireless connection is available. During the conference, there are also a number of side events. And in particular, there are presentations by PhD students, a practitioners forum, book launches, films, and a cocktail this evening hosted by the Ville de Genève, the Council of Geneva. Details of all these events, again, are in the brochure. But I'd particularly like to draw your attention to the fact that we have a number of doctoral students and practitioners who've really made a considerable effort to be here and have prepared materials and posters which will be outside after the conference sessions in the afternoon. And I think we all know that these are the individuals who are closest to realities on the ground, who have the time to really collect the detailed empirical data and spend much time analyzing it. And we all need to learn from this. So I hope we will show solidarity with their efforts by attending their side events after the conference sessions. On Wednesday afternoon, the UNNGLS are also organizing a special session on alternative finance and complementary currencies. And then this is followed by the ILO's meeting on trade union and cooperatives on Thursday. So finally, before turning to the other speakers and launching us into the substance that lies ahead, which I know we all want to get to, I also just want to thank a few of those without whose generous financial support none of us would be here. This includes the ILO again, specifically the Department for Partnership and Field Support and the Job Creation and Enterprise Department, EVOS, the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation, and the Ville de Genève. And on behalf of UNRISD, I'd also like to acknowledge the generosity of funders who provide our core institutional support, CEDA, Sweden, the UK's Department for International Development, and the Government of Finland. And sincere thanks, of course, also go to everyone who has made this event a reality through many months of extremely hard work. For UNRISD, I would like to acknowledge the Deputy Director, Peter Utting, who has driven this process from the start, Nadine van Dijk, with whom I think you've all been in contact and will have seen around this morning, and has demonstrated amazing organizational skills in getting us here, and many other colleagues, particularly our communications and outreach team. I know that Simel Essim and her colleagues at the ILO have also put a huge amount of effort into the organization. I don't know you all, but thank you. And staff from UNRISD and ILO will be busy throughout these days to answer any questions and provide any support you need. So I'm very pleased to be joined in this introductory opening session by the Director-General of the ILO, Guy Ryder, by Brazil's National Secretary for Social and Solidarity Economy, Paul Singer, and we seem to have lost him for the moment, José Luis Coraggio, who heads a master's program in social economy at the General Sarmiento National University in Argentina, but is also the director of the Latin American Network of Researchers on Social and Solidarity Economy. I'll introduce him again when he comes to give the keynote speech. Sadly, we have sincere last-minute apologies with great regrets from the French Minister of Social Economy, Benoît Hamon, and from Jean-Louis Laville, both of whom were unable to attend due to last-minute issues. So this means the conference kicks off with a decidedly Latin American flavor, but we hope that will be redressed in the next few days, subsequent sessions, when we hear from all around the world. I hope there'll be a few minutes at the end of this opening session for a round of questions to speakers. We'll see how time goes. So first, I would like to turn the floor to Professor Paul Singer, who currently leads the National Secretariat for Solidarity Economy within the Ministry of Work and Employment in Brazil. He formerly also held a position of Professor of Economics at the University of Sao Paulo in Brazil, where he created a technological incubator of social projects. And he was also the co-founder of the Workers' Party in Brazil, and has published widely on the issue of social and solidarity economy. So I think he represents the whole range of research practitioner and policymaker in one person that we also have around the room. So welcome to make some opening remarks.
Well, good morning. I would like to thank very much UNRISD and all our colleagues from the United Nations for making this meeting possible. For us who are directly involved in solidarity economy, it is a one-time event which is really important, as I will try to show in the next minutes. International meetings of social and solidarity economy have become more frequent lately. In 2011, the ILO assembled us in Montreal, and that meeting showed us, or at least showed to me, that the solidarity and social economy has become really a worldwide movement. This is quite recent. Most of the time we thought it was something limited to Brazil, or maybe to Latin America, or maybe to some Latin European countries. But the last years showed very, very clearly that in all continents and in many, many countries, social and solidarity economy are quite present and gaining in importance. Last year in Rio Plus 20, we had another worldwide encounter, we of the solidarity economy, in which I had the pleasure to know leading representatives of Asian social solidarity economy. This was the first time, really. Social solidarity economy is spreading and growing thanks to initiatives mainly from civil society. We live in a globalized world in which financial crises are spreading from country to country, from continent to continent. Social solidarity economy is a defensive reaction mainly by the victims of unemployment, impoverishment, and social injustice. Many different cultures are contributing nowadays to social and solidarity economy. Religions, cultures, different political historical experiences, and different fights against oppression, all of them enrich and improve the potential of social and solidarity economy. That is what makes social solidarity economy richer and more diversified. We have very much to learn from each other, and we need to do it in order to be effective in our efforts to bring to life another economy, hopefully the material basis of another much better and more human world society. Thank you.
Thank you, and we'll come back. I think we will have time for more discussion at the end, but thank you for those brief and welcoming and I think remarks that highlight the timeliness of this meeting. And now I'd like to hand over to the Director-General, who of course needs no introduction in this building, having worked here in different roles at different periods before being elected to the position of Director-General of the ILO last year. But apart from his work with the ILO, of course, he has a long and distinguished career in the trade union movement, particularly being elected as the first General Secretary of the International Trade Union Confederation from 2006. And I think that engagement with the workers' movements also is a very important issue for thinking in relation to our discussions of the social and solidarity economy. So, welcome. I shouldn't be welcoming you, I know, but please do some remarks.
Well, thank you very much, Sarah. Good morning to you, to Secretary Singer, to Senor Coraggio, and to you all. I'm very happy to welcome you here to the International Labour Office, and we are, of course, extremely pleased as well to be working together with UNRISD to co-host this conference on the social and solidarity economy. I've listened carefully to what has been said already this morning by you, Sarah, and by Secretary Singer. And I must say, as somebody who grew up in a household where the visit of the man from the co-op, and it always was a man, on a Friday evening is part of my childhood memories. It's a long time ago, I have to say, and it was quite a long way away in the north of England. But I'm very encouraged to hear the social solidarity economy described this morning, as it already has been, as a world movement, one that is growing and one which offers, I think, perspectives to find answers to the pressing questions which we at the ILO are trying to address in the world of work in conditions of crisis. You will be aware, I think, that this House, the UN, is a tripartite House. Those of you sitting right in front of me may not be aware of it, but you're sitting in the government benches, you're sitting in the employer benches, and you're sitting where I used to be in the worker benches. I'm sure it's entirely fortuitous where you've taken your seat, but I mention it to let you all know that this is a complex House, and one which, through its tripartite composition, I think brings real added values to the important questions that we are here to discuss this morning and in the next 2 days. Now, friends, since I became the Director-General of this organisation in October of last year, I've given particular priority to strengthening the ILO's research and analytical capacities. And I've had very strong support from our member states in our governing body in that objective. And I think that part of those efforts should certainly involve us in closer collaboration with other UN agencies and research institutions such as UNRISD. And at the ILO we therefore look forward very much to building on the ideas and the proposals that will emerge, I am sure, from the important discussions that you will be undertaking this week. We do look forward to what you produce. We will be taking good note of it and learning from it. We are, of course, at a particularly difficult and pressing moment in the world of work. I'm sure that from wherever you have come here to the ILO today, you are well aware and do not need me to remind you of the seriousness of the challenges confronting the global economy, from the historically high unemployment rates prevailing. There are more than 200 million unemployed in the world today, and the figures are going up. When we talk about exit from crisis, let's remember that the labour markets of the world are falling deeper into crisis, and that affects particularly young workers who are more exposed than any others to the problems of exclusion, those of increasing inequality in the world, persistent poverty, and of course unacceptable conditions of work in the informal economy, to which the ILO is giving renewed attention. I think we would all agree that meeting and overcoming these challenges requires fresh thinking. It requires innovative policy proposals to provide practical assistance and answers to the real problems faced by people who are increasingly sceptical of the capacity of established processes of public life to provide those responses. And Sarah, I can only agree with you. If you just sort of look over your shoulder and think back to where we were in 2008 at the time that the crisis really broke upon us, at that point a financial crisis which has mutated into the most serious labour and social crisis of our lifetimes. If you think back 5 years, the discourse from all spectrums, all parts of the political spectrum, were about the need for a paradigm change, an entire recasting of the policy agenda of globalisation. And I'm afraid that with the benefit of hindsight, one has to worry that that moment has been lost. And in fact, what we're seeing as we move towards this polemic of austerity and the failure to move our economy forward in terms of growth, job creation and social progress is a slipping back rather than a jump forward. And I hope that the ideas coming from your conference today will help to reverse that unfortunate dynamic. Now, colleagues, the concept of the social and solidarity economy has been recognised on repeated occasions here in the ILO. The Declaration on Social Justice for a Fair Globalisation, which was adopted unanimously by our International Labour Conference in 2008, and which stands as a key guide to the future of the action of our organisation. That declaration recognised that a strong social economy is critical to sustainable economic development and to the creation of employment opportunities, along with productive, profitable and sustainable enterprises and a viable public sector. 5 years before that, and reference has already been made to this, the promotion of cooperative recommendations, that's ILO recommendation 193, was adopted by the same conference and stipulated that, I quote, "A balanced society necessitates the existence of strong public and private sectors, as well as a strong, cooperative, mutual, social and non-governmental sector." So these messages are well understood here in the ILO. Now, a large number of practical initiatives have been undertaken since then around the world. Revision of legislation addressing cooperatives in line with the provisions of Recommendation 193 have brought about more autonomy, independence and business viability for cooperatives in over 70 countries. France and Brazil, who have lead roles in this conference, have established ministries of social and solidarity economy. In the past 2 years, Greece, Ecuador, Mexico, Portugal and Spain have all passed legislation to improve the legal framework for the social and solidarity economy, something which shows the relevance of that economy to addressing the current crisis. In 2009, we at the ILO convened a conference in Johannesburg on the social economy, Africa's response to the global crisis, and this in answer to the specific requests from our tripartite constituents in that region. The participants, who came from governments, employers and workers' organisations, as well as social economy enterprises from 15 African countries, adopted a plan of action for the promotion of social economy enterprises and organisations on the continent. And since 2010, the ILO has held 3 meetings of what we are calling a Social and Solidarity Academy in Turin, in Montreal and in Agadir, bringing together academics, practitioners and constituents to discuss these matters. Several ILO decent work country programmes and technical cooperation projects have been promoting cooperatives and other social and solidarity economy enterprises as central tenets of their response strategies to development challenges. And this has involved generating youth employment, strengthening rural employment, and addressing the informal economy. And this year, the ILO initiated research documenting and analysing legal innovations in the social and solidarity economy. Now, all of these ILO activities have helped draw attention to an extraordinary diversity within the social and solidarity economy and to its potential for innovation to respond to pressing social needs. And we are also well aware of the challenges that exist around the world for the social and solidarity economy. And I think this conference will be addressing both the potential and the limitations that are before us, from definitional problems to policy implications, both in the current context and what might be done in the future. Can I also take a moment to draw your attention to the discussions that are gathering momentum and in which the ILO is involved on the post-millennium development goals that will apply after 2015. We are in the multilateral system in the process of putting together the post-2015 development agenda. In that context, the ILO has been calling for a job-centred development agenda that prioritises full and productive employment and decent work, along with social protection floors for poverty reduction and resilience. Now, you may be wondering in what way all of these goals relate to your concerns to social and solidarity economy enterprises and organisations. Well, let me try to answer that by referring to a meeting I held quite recently with the President of the International Cooperative Alliance, Pauline Green, when we discussed 4 critical areas for joint action: the economic crisis, youth employment, the informal economy, and rural employment. And I want to just make some brief comments about these 4 areas before passing the floor over to your keynote speakers. The first point I want to make is that ILO research shows that cooperative enterprises around the world are showing remarkable resilience to the crisis. Financial cooperatives remain far more sound than most of their sector. Consumer cooperatives are reporting increased turnover. Worker cooperatives are seeing growth as people choose that option to respond to new economic realities. And the survival rate of worker cooperatives in several countries appears to equal or surpass that of other enterprises. Membership in other social and solidarity economy enterprises and organisations is also increasing. In Europe alone, the social and solidarity economy provides paid employment to over 14.5 million people, and that's about 6.5% of total European paid employment. It's far from negligible. The social and solidarity economy can therefore be a key building block for a jobs-oriented recovery strategy. Evidence-based policy in that regard does require further research and statistical evidence to track not just the quantity but also the quality of the jobs created. There will be a forthcoming International Conference of Labour Statisticians session this October, which will look into precisely the issue of statistics on cooperatives as a starting point. And the ILO is also working in crisis countries, starting with Greece, on enterprise restructuring via worker cooperatives. The second point, youth employment. Close to 75 million young people are out of work, 4 million more than in 2007. Long-term unemployment afflicting about 1/3 of the European young unemployed is becoming a major structural issue. Typically, youth unemployment rates are 2 to 3 times as high as generalised unemployment rates in economies. An increasing number of young people are neither in employment nor in education or training, and that is especially the case in developed countries. The conclusions of last year's ILO International Labour Conference highlighted the importance of cooperatives and the social economy enterprises for tackling this crisis of youth employment. Given the opportunity, they can provide youth with gainful wage and self-employment, and that potential needs to be fully exploited. In that context, an enabling environment is critical for businesses, cooperatives and social enterprises to thrive. The ILO is providing assistance in that regard, and I want to mention a number of our technical cooperation projects. For example, in Kenya and Zimbabwe, the project on youth employment support, jobs for the unemployed and marginalised young people, supports entrepreneurship and cooperative development through vocational skills and business training. Along with Co-op Africa, this project has developed a challenge fund, which has provided increased access to financial services for young people. To date, more than 1,500 young people have become members of such youth savings and credit cooperatives that are managed by youth themselves. On the third area that I mentioned, the informal economy, let's recall that this accounts for between 35 and 90% of total employment in many developing countries, and is not confined, as some might have a tendency to believe, to traditional rural and urban informal locations. Various types of informal contracts, precarious employment and undeclared work have been gaining ground, even in formal establishments. Informal work, therefore, reflects a very diverse set of realities of wage and self-employment worldwide. Social and solidarity economy does have the potential to act as a bridge for workers and enterprises to get out of informality. And the ILO is establishing the formalisation of informal economic activity as one of its priorities for the years ahead. Many cooperatives do start as informal group enterprises, and later, as they grow, as they become viable business enterprises, they are registered. As legal entities, they then become part of the formal economy. Fourth and lastly, let me just remind you that rural areas are home and workplace to half of the world's population and 75% of the world's poor. In the rural economy, cooperatives, mutual benefit societies and microfinance organisations are key actors in addressing the goals of poverty reduction, food security and social inclusion. These organisations can play a role in the promotion of rural entrepreneurship, employment creation and providing representation to rural workers. Cooperatives play a particularly important role, particularly where private businesses hesitate to go into rural areas and public authorities do not provide basic services. They can be and often are instrumental in providing opportunity for productive employment, as well as the provision of healthcare, education, water, improved sanitation, roads and market access. Additionally, agricultural cooperatives can offer smallholders a wide range of services, such as improved access to markets, imports, information technologies, loans and other financial services, training and even warehouses. And all of this contributes to poverty alleviation and food security. Colleagues, in conclusion, let me just emphasise that in times of multiple crises like today, when austerity is often a dominant response, decent work, for which the ILO stands, is at risk. And we do need to have deeper understanding of what social and solidarity economy enterprises and organisations can offer to secure the expansion of decent and productive employment opportunities in a sustainable framework. And we need to have a better grasp at the ILO of what social and solidarity economy enterprises and organisations need to be enabled to do. Ladies and gentlemen, we are ready to follow up and play a role in translating the outcomes of this conference into research, into policy and into action to achieve better strategies and interventions. So let me once again thank you for being here, thank you for the work that you will do, and assure you once more that the outputs of this conference will be an important resource for the ILO as we move forward. Thank you very much for your attention.
Well, thank you, I think, for an extremely informative presentation, and particularly the insights into what the ILO is doing, the range of activities, I think the legal frameworks, the training, the policy work that has obviously underpins a lot of probably what we're going to be talking about over the next few days. And I think having this angle from the work, the employment, the decent work perspective to really help shape why these enterprises, this social economy, is so important in all the contexts. I think we all know that, but it was excellent to have that laid out so clearly. So thank you very much. So now let me turn to our keynote speaker, José Luis Coraggio. I did introduce you briefly and you disappeared, but as I said, he's the director of a master's program in social economy at the General Sarmiento National University in Argentina. And also, I think, importantly for many of you, the director of what, very interesting, a Latin American network of researchers on social and solidarity economy. An economist by training, he's written very extensively on the social economy. I think there are some display copies of books over there with very interesting sounding titles, so I think we'll all be encouraged to read them. And I would just like to welcome you. We look forward to what you have to say and to your engagement in the conference. Thank you.
Peter asked me to make first, unfortunately Jean-Louis Laville cannot be here, to first try to put a conceptual framework and then to speak about Latin America. So, the conceptual framework, I think we had to start by defining what we understand by economy, if we are going to speak of social and solidarity economy. We can all agree that the economy, the economic system, has to do about how we organize the production, the distribution, the interchange, circulation, and consumption of goods and services. That's very easy. Now, the problem is, what is the aim of the economy? What do we think it should be the aim of the economy? We have at least two positions. One is that the economy has to guarantee the liberty of everyone for private enterprise, and this has been institutionalized as a market economy. The values that accompany this position are individualism, utilitarianism, competition, limitlessness, the social irresponsibility, because you had to take care of your profits or your results. And there is a second position that says what we had to do with the economy is to guarantee that everybody has access to the means of life for a dignified social life. The values are different. There are solidarity, as in social and solidarity economy. We look for a plurality of motivations, not only utilitarianism, cooperation, prudence in the use of resources, social responsibility, and positive freedom. Of course, all economies organize following a set of principles, a different hierarchical order of principles, including, of course, the distribution of wealth, the possibility of producing for self-consumption, circulation through networks, like in commerce, like in just commerce, for instance, of reciprocity, the consumption. It could be consumerism or could be responsible consumption, for instance. The first position or the first alternative is the market economy. In the market economy, we have those that are now pushing for a more market economy. They think that we are arriving to the end of history, because they see an evolutionary path towards a market economy and a society made up of individuals. The only principle they put in the center is the market principle, not only as a motivation, but also as a coordination of the economy. They postulate that the market is the only feasible and the best way to organize an economy, and they make of GNP growth the main indicator of the efficiency of an economy. Nowadays we have the neoliberal attempt to approach that utopia of the perfect market, and its strategy of globalization is producing the disaster, social and ecological disaster that we are facing today. So we arrived to the conclusion that we need another economy, not the market economy, for human sake. Now the question is it possible to have another economy? So we go to social economy. Yes, please. The approach of the social economy is that all economies are historical constructions. They don't follow an evolutionary path, like, for instance, underdevelopment to development. That each society can institutionalize its economy combining a set of principles, not only one principle, not only reciprocity, for instance, and most of all, not only the market principle. That this construction is not easy, that is done within a power structure and starting with a situation that in many cases are not favorable to this. There are many solutions to the economic problem. There is not only one. And we define the economic problem not as maximizing and using efficiently the scarce resources in order to have profit or to have GNP growth, but as how to guarantee the reproduction and development of life with dignity for all. Like the Zapatistas said, we need an economy, we need a society where everybody can have a place, where we have no excluded persons. The economies can be and should be economies with market, but not market economies. It is that the market should be subordinated to the social, to the kind of society we want. Yes, let's continue, please. Now, if we go to the concept of social and solidarity economy, we will say that it is necessary that the relations of why do we call it social and solidarity economy? We mean that if we are going to build a society where everybody can be included with dignity, the solidarity is a principle, one of the main principles of organization. Now, I distinguish three levels of solidarity. A micro level, it is the micro-organizations of the social and solidarity economy, like a cooperative, like a network, which is the solidarity is internal to the organization. The workers that work in a cooperative, they are solidary among themselves, but not necessarily they are solidarian with the rest of even the cooperatives. Here we have as economic units, the workers' households. We think this is a very meaningful economic organization that is not included in the usual list of economic organizations. The communities, the Indian communities, the Afro-descendant communities, and new communities, cooperatives, mutualities, etc. Now this is at a micro level. There is a meso level where we have organic articulations between the micro-organizations. There we can have a more complex form of solidarity and solidarity with the other, where, for instance, we have a network of cooperatives, we have a network of different forms of economic organization, and where we can have synergy. And then we have a third level, which I would say is the systemic level, where solidarity is embodied in many structures, the state structure, the private sector structure, and the popular economy, as we'll see, where civil society and state are fundamental. Solidarity economy is usually, at least in Latin America, associated with the popular economy. So we discuss, are the popular economic organizations solidarian, or are they competitive, are they individualistic or not? Some people think that the popular sectors are solidarian by themselves. Nevertheless, we think that we have to think in terms of a mixed economy, where the sector of social and solidarity economy must include the public sector, the public economy, the popular economy, and the private sector economy. I'm now drawing somehow this mixed economy. You have the green, which is the public economy, which is supposed to be aimed at the common good. I said supposed because many times it's the accumulation of political power what organizes the public resources. Then we have, of course, the private enterprise economy, which is aimed at capital accumulation. And we have the popular economy, which is aimed at the reproduction of life in the better conditions possible for the members of this organization. The household is the best example. The household has a multiple strategy: production for self-consumption, production of goods for the market, hiring of their labor capacity, community work. Is a mixed strategy to survive or to have a good life. And when we have to draw the solidarity economy, is in the center of this mixed economy, and then we see that part of the popular economy is solidarian, part of the public economy is solidarian, and also part of the private sector, the private capitalist sector, can be solidarian. Examples of popular economy, solidarian popular economy are, for instance, the cooperatives, the associations, the network of producers to sell together, etc. The ones I was saying before at the micro level, and also we have the public sector has to comply with the principle of redistribution, which is present in every economy that we know. And this principle of redistribution has to do, for instance, with the fiscal system, where you take of the ones that have a lot to the ones that have nothing. The health policy, education policy, the transfers of income are ways of redistribution, and this is kind of a structural solidarity. And then we have the private sector that might have philanthropic ways of solidarity. Also, we have the social enterprises that are a mix of solidarity economy and the enterprise system of organization of the economy. And we have examples there. For instance, when we cross the state sector with the popular sector, we have participatory budgeting, where the people can discuss how to use the public resources, etc. I had to go quickly, so I cannot get into any more details. Please. Now, we go to Latin America. What is the point of departure of Latin America? We had to take care of this. It's not the same that in Africa, or of course not like in Europe. We have been an early laboratory of neoliberal policies. It started with the dictatorship of Pinochet in 1973. It continues with the 1976 dictatorship in Argentina. We have the Chicago Boys telling our countries what to do with the economy. They open the markets, they liberalize the economy, they privatize the economy, no solidarity there. And we learn a lot. We learn a lot, and we would like that lesson would have been learned before by the rest of the world. We had structural problems before the neoliberalism. We were in the way of trying to develop according to the evolutionary possibility of getting a structure like the so-called developed countries. We had very limited social rights. When we started with neoliberal policies, they fight explicitly against the system of rights. They wanted precarious labor. They wanted no longer. They didn't want syndicates fighting for the rights of the workers, and this was explicit. They wanted precariousness, not long-run work with rights. We ended with a massive structural poverty. At the beginning, the international organization think this was temporal, and they have programs for a temporal unemployment. Then they learned this was structural and it was going to be on for many decades and maybe for always, they think. There was a lack of a generalized social security system. We have a profound social fragmentation, a concentration of wealth, inequality, as was said before. We have a weak state and a large rural and urban informal sector. I want to clarify here, for us, informal sector is not the same that the popular economy, the economy of the workers. The popular economy has a sector of informal economy, but also the private enterprise sector, and even the state sector have informality. We have lost the complexity of our economies, the industrialization. It was not the same. It's difficult to speak of Latin America. There are many differences, different cultures, different stories. It was not the same, the dictatorship in Brazil than the dictatorship in Argentina regarding what happened with industrialization. We ended up under the pressure of the external debt, pressure by the international organization like the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, to enter into competitiveness, what we call, CEPAL call, spurious competitiveness, because it was at the cost of lowering salaries, of making precarious the labor relations, of ending with ecological equilibrium. And we have lost sovereignty. Yes, please. Now, starting with that, with the end, it's not ended. Unfortunately, neoliberal policies and neoliberal values are everywhere, but now we are having a defensive, maybe a constructive reaction to that. What kind of social and solidarity economy do we have now in Latin America? As I said, it's very difficult to speak of this for all Latin America. We will say there is no paradigm. There is no model. We don't say cooperatives are the model. We don't say mutualities are the model. We don't say networks of selling together or micro-enterprises are the model. There is a variety of forms of organization which are solidarian in the sense I said before. I think it's useful to say we have three, in Latin America we have three levels of practices by civil society and by governments. The first is to promote individual undertakings. The second is to build an organic subsector of social solidarity economy, and the third is to engage in a systemic transformation. Now, we don't have to choose. This is not an option. We need the three levels. Sometimes it predominates the first level, but then we need a strategic view of the third level, for instance. And we need, from the point of view of efficiency, the second level of organization. Yes, please. Let's see the first one, the promotion of individual undertaking. For instance, Argentina, Brazil, and most, let me say this, I'm taking 5 countries to make a reference, Argentina, Brazil, Bolivia, Ecuador, and Venezuela. Not because the other countries are not important, but these are the ones I think are more distinguished in relation to this subject. Argentina, Brazil, and most of the other Latin American countries participate in this idea that you can promote individual undertakings to reinsert, to insert, or to include people in the market, the same market that excluded them. This is, as a matter of fact, if we look at how this appears, it is a continuation of social policies. The neoliberal social policies focus in the poor and extreme poverty. Now, they realized that it was not enough to distribute food, to distribute even income transfers, that it was necessary to create new jobs, to create self-managed and associative forms of economic. So the idea is to have a productive insertion of a small associative micro-enterprises, which at the beginning were seen as a reinsertion, as I said, waiting for wage labor. The idea was that wage labor was coming sooner or later. I think this idea is no longer there. There is in this process, there is a culture of internal solidarity. For instance, the condition for receiving subsidies for this kind of micro-enterprise is that they are not individual, but that they are associative, at least 3, 4, 5 people associating in creating these new forms of economy. Self-management and association is important. None of these programs is pointed to economic relation where there is patron, how you say, the owner and the wage labor. I mean, this is like a cooperative organization. There is solidarity, but very limited with the other. Each association, each organization is asked to be solidary internally, but not necessarily to the rest of the economy or the rest of the same kind of organizations. Eventually, it appears the problem as we better organize as a change of value, but this is a kind of extension of the same strategy. Microcredit is a very important instrument here and is all over Latin America. Is sometimes supported by the state, and in that case the rates of interest are none, are zero or very low, and also by private organizations like NGOs, and sometimes they have an 80% or 100% of interest, so it's not cheap to have microcredit. And now the banks are interested in microcredit because they see that the poor pay, and pay better than the rich. And it's becoming a business for profit. Now, state and NGOs are the main pushers of these kind of organizations. Eventually, the same syndicates. In the case of Argentina, one of the centrals of one of the syndicates have included the defense of the rights of those that do not have employment. The CUT in Brazil has included this among its objectives to help create this kind of organization. But in general, syndicates are worried about their workers. They even don't want the competition of this kind of popular organizations. Continuing with this, we find that the paradigm of these policies is the private enterprise. If you see how they educate the future entrepreneur, collective entrepreneur, the criteria is the same of an idealistic capital enterprise. How they define efficiency, how they measure the resources, how they define sustainability. So these policies are within the culture of capitalist enterprises. there isn't much empirical. We find there is much internal dynamics in this organization. They tend to be, if they are left alone, they tend to be quite static. There is, and this is insufficient to solve the structural crisis. It's insufficient because you cannot have hundreds of thousands of this small organization. There is no real capacity to organize that much organizations, small organizations. There is also a problem of identity. Who are, how they see themselves, the workers of this organization, social and solidarity organization, or at least solidarity organization. We have found through research that at the beginning they say, well, this is not a work. I'm being helped, but the real work is to have to work in a factory where they pay me a salary. There is also the stigmatization from the rest of society of these works. They are not being considered real work. I'm not talking about cooperatives. I'm talking about these small enterprises that are being pushed by these social policies. There is much influence of the Catholic Church and this idea that you have to concentrate and be good to the poor. I would say the social and solidarity economy is not made only for the poor. Morally, they have to be in a first priority. But social and solidarity economy is for everybody. I mean, if you look at some cooperatives, you have medium sectors, you have professionals, you don't start with the very poor people. There is a fight there, or a struggle between a more clientelist approach, because this is distribution, this is help, and those that say we had to work towards emancipation, and we need a bottom-up process. Now, most of these small enterprises have the so-called sustainability problem, viability, as it was said before, how they can survive in the market. Do they need subsidy forever, or can they just be sustained by their own economic production? Then we have a second category, which is, I would say, partial attempts to build social and solidarity organic complexes. We found some of that in Brazil, I would say. You find it in Bolivia, in Ecuador, in Venezuela, unfortunately not in Argentina, where there is a wider scope of solidarity, although it's mainly utilitarian. I mean, you get solidarian because it's better for your economic purposes. This includes the creation of a synergic local context at the same time that you promote individual undertakings. Complementary value chains, networking, relations with the local communities, working through territories. For instance, you start asking first, looking for a community that is organized. Second, that they have to say together what are their needs, not their demands, their needs. And then we can say what kind of activity will be viable because they have a real demand in the community, not like making an enterprise and then looking who is interested and to whom you can sell. You know, these undertakings have a limit in the context, and so the idea here is that you create the context, a solidarian context, based in solving the needs of everyone. A solidarity articulation of the elements from all sectors. I mean, you need a local government that is involved in this kind of policy. You need at least a sector of the private enterprises to be involved in this, and also, of course, the popular economy. We talk here of the solidarity of local financial system, not of microcredit by itself, but of a building system of financial solidarity. We talk of networks of barter, which is a very important institution of solidarity economy, and also social currencies. Please. Continuing with this, we need for this a more integral policy, not that you have different policies that land in the community territory, but that the community can say what do they need, what kind of education, what kind of health, what kind of credit, etc. Here there is the possibility of the emergence of collective actors. Here you have the possibility of the co-construction of public policies and the definition of legal institutions. We have some examples here. I think Brazil is going ahead, well ahead, and Paul Singer is responsible for that, in the co-construction of policy of solidarity economy. We have identities that are not so vulnerable because there is this synergy. There is, I would say, in the background, you have an influence of the ideas of Freire's pedagogy of liberation and of the theology of liberation. The idea of a bottom-up process, the idea that you need an emancipatory project, and not only how you have an income and how you are included in the market. Here, a main problem is not only the sustainability of private undertakings, but the sustainability of public policies. Are these public policies going to continue with new governments? We have experiences where change in the government ends with these kind of policies. Yes, please. And then we have the more complex idea of systemic transformation. We find that only, unfortunately, in Bolivia, Ecuador, and Venezuela. Here you have a political and a cultural project of a structural transformation with wide popular support. In all these cases, mostly in Ecuador and Bolivia, social movements were in front of the structural change. They are responsible for putting national and popular projects, governments in place. Here you have a strong redistribution of land, means of production, knowledge, and income. Sometimes when we speak of social and solidarity economy, we don't include the redistribution of land. This is the agrarian reform, the urban reform, a major reform of the education system, of the health system, of the security, social security system. And you have here also processes of market reform and regulation of the market. These countries have negotiated the external debt strongly. Also Argentina and in some way Brazil have, for instance, they have disconnected from some of the international organizations that were pushing for neoliberal policies by paying the debt to the World Bank or to the International Monetary Fund. And they know that there is no way, not only of a private, small undertaking to survive, but of the whole social and solidarity economic system to survive unless we have economic integration among countries. So there is a big push where Argentina, Brazil, and most of the countries have been following, like Mercosur, UNASUR, ALBA, and the CELAC, which is more a political organization that is competing with OEAs, for instance. There is a major return. The state is returning in these countries. For instance, they have nationalized key industries, and mostly the ones that are strategic, but also the ones that grab the international rent, petroleum, mining, or agrarian activities, which, given the prices, favorable prices in the world market, are receiving a lot of international rent. So these states are taking that rent to redistribute it as part of the solidarity economy. There have been major legal reforms and new constitutions in this country, new mandates given by society, by social movement, of what an economic system should be. There is then a structural solidarity, a major redistribution of resources, and reciprocity-based social security system, which is a very important part of a social and solidarity economic system. A cultural revolution is attempted, so we don't speak of development, or some people speak of development. We speak of buen vivir, of vivir bien, which is a proposition of another civilizatory project, which is discussing, which is criticizing the Eurocentric development idea that economic growth is on the basis of welfare and that you have to grow and you have a growth in the GNP, and that's the condition for welfare plus some redistribution. For instance, the Mother Nature is a concept that is used, which is, of course, based on the tradition of ancestral communities, peoples, and in the constitution of Bolivia and Ecuador, you have nature. In Ecuador, we say, nature has rights, and those rights has to be defended. So it's a position against extractivism. You use nature to solve the human economic problems. There is a convergence with social movements. It's not the matter of creating a social and solidarity economic movement. You have that in Brazil, and I think it's quite relevant, but the idea in these countries is that you have to converge with another social movements, the new social movement, like the gender and feminist social movement, the peasant movement, the decolonializing movement, environmental movement, human rights movement, and the question is how you convince the leadership of these movements to introduce in their agenda the construction of a social and solidarity economy. The World Social Forum is an example of this search for a convergence. Here I have, I think I will have to skip this. How am I on time? Coming to the end. Now here you can have for these countries, the idea, in Bolivia they call it plural economy, in Ecuador social and solidarity economic system, and this is in the Constitution. The Constitution said that the economic system has to be social and solidary. In Venezuela, they can call it, it depends, social economy or popular economy. And the list that follows are the forms of economic organization that are recognized in this Constitution. Not only private enterprise, not only cooperatives, but other forms. For instance, in Ecuador is recognized the domestic economy. And it means that policies will be directed to the economy, the domestic economy. You know that if you measure the market value, the so-called market value of the production in domestic units, you can increase statistically and really recognize that they produce about 30, 40, 50% of GNP, which is not measured. So this is a very important part of the social and solidarity economy. And also you have, for instance, new ways, new forms of solving the needs of the people, like in Venezuela, the missions, where there are big campaigns by the mobilizing masses of people to solve the education problem, the health problem, the problem of lack of work. And also in the Constitution of Venezuela is recognized explicitly fair trade and social currencies. Yes, please. Here we have a list of the principles that you find in the constitutions. I will not go through that, but the market principle is one more about a list of many principles. Yes. To sum up, I would say most countries in Latin America apply the idea of capitalism of the poor. This is part of the new neoliberal policies and is everywhere. They look for individual or associative insertion in the market by means of the development of an asset portfolio for the poor, seed capital, microloans, capacity creation, education. Now, with a mix of social and solidarity economy variants, Argentina, Brazil, Bolivia, Ecuador, and Venezuela have experienced a return of the state and a recovery of sovereignty. They all withdrew from the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, or at least they don't receive the missions to say what to do. They have introduced major income redistribution policies. They attack the poverty through redistribution, but also through these social and solidarity undertakings. Argentina, for instance, has restored the reciprocity-based social security system. It has been privatized, like most of the so-called developed countries, and many people lose their savings in the middle of financial crisis. Now we have a reciprocity-based, state-promoted security system, as we have before. Bolivia and Venezuela have progressed with the redistribution of land. Unfortunately, Brazil has not, as it should. It was promised. In Argentina, nobody speaks of agrarian reform. And you have Brazil has made progress with the construction of policy for a solidarity economy. I think it's an example in that. And as I say, Paul Singer is very responsible for that. Yes, please. Now, this is not easy task. In the future, we have many questions, many pending matters which are conflictive and are of a political nature. For instance, how much Mother Nature and how much extractivism you can have in one of these processes. For instance, you have a struggle now in Ecuador and in Bolivia because several ancestral communities do not want petroleum or mining to occur in their territories. And the governments want to push that in order to have rent for redistribution. Is this a contradiction between particular interests and general interests, or are these communities representing better the general interest? I don't have an answer. I think this is a contradiction, and we have to look forward in each country to see how we solve that. There is a problem with verticality. All of this, well, not Brazil, probably, but in the other 4 countries there is a strong presidency, very strong presidency, leadership. One of the variants of populism, where the presidents want to meet directly with the masses and they don't want intermediate social, civic society organizations. So this is a problem when you want to solve a different economy. You cannot build, I would say, a social and solidarity economy without true democracy, with true participation of the majorities. There is a problem of how much initiative will have the state and how much co-construction of policies. Maybe you have moments where the state had to take the initiative and to create the condition for the co-construction policies. Sometimes this comes from the bottom up. The problem of the discussion about the capitalist system. Are we working to increase the insertion in the capital market, or are we proposing an alternative to capitalism. Here you have the contradiction between this big task and political pragmatism, short-term pragmatism, because you have election every 4 years and people want results. It's not easy to say we are fighting for a change in the world paradigm. It will take 50 years to get there. The making of a social and solidarity economy has to be shared by the people. Is this plausible? Is there credibility for this proposal? Is this accepted as a new way of creating jobs and satisfying needs? The possibility of solving this is that showing that there are many examples. This is not a model that is utopian. You have already in the reality many examples of social and solidarity economy. We had to show them, we had to systematize them, and this is very important for this political and cultural struggle. The problem of timing, how long it will take to see the results. I would say 30 years maybe, when you speak of a system. Industrialization in Latin America took 30 years, at least. The neoliberals changed the economy in 30 years. Well, why not 30 years for social and solidarity economy? Of course, with the results in the past to that. As I say, there is a matter of how you include these economic objectives into the agenda of the other social movements. And there is a problem. Will this government last enough? Are they sustainable? What would happen if in Venezuela the government party would have lost? What happened if in Argentina or in Brazil or in Ecuador they lost the elections? Probably this idea will not continue because society still has not these aims embodied in them. I think, yes, please. And this is all. I thank you for your attention. Thank you very much.